rough when you depend on me to give you weapons, items, armor, information for your journey, and still you still pushing and trying to hurt me. Life's tough when you're an NPC. Life's rough when you depend.
Well, the strangeness just keeps on coming. Now, there's problems with my couch, so I have to record this from my computer chair. Such is the way of life. At either rate, for the first time in 19 episodes, I am finally going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I do not think we need a lot of introduction on this one. Dungeons and Dragons has been and will always be the flagship game in tabletop pencil and paper role-playing games. What started as a small handbook from the creators of Gary Gygax and Dave Aronson has blossomed into a juggernaut. Now on its 5th edition, Dungeons & Dragons holds a monopoly over the gaming world that will never be surpassed. And yeah, I know there are other games out there. I'm not stupid. Call of Cthulhu, World of Darkness, Shadowrun, GURPS, the list goes on of very large and influential gaming franchises. But no matter what your favorite is, no matter if you like certain ones over other ones, you have to admit that Dungeons & Dragons is the standard bearer. It is the stereotype. It is the game that everybody knows. Even non-gaming fans know what Dungeons & Dragons is. Odds are very likely that the majority of us got the gateway game of Dungeons & Dragons. Most of us ended up starting playing Dungeons & Dragons or some sort of offshoot, like, let's say, Pathfinder, as an alternative to Dungeons & Dragons, but still a similar concept from the creators. No matter what, Dungeons & Dragons is the staple of gaming. There are plenty of videos I can do on D&D, and don't worry, I'm going to go through all of them. But I'm going to start off with one that is a bit of a hot-button topic for a lot of gaming fans out there. I want to start off with a very interesting video by reviewing Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Created by none other than Monty Cook! For this recent generation, most of you have either grown up with 3.5, got into gaming with 3.5, or got into gaming via Pathfinder, which is an improved version of 3.5 created by some of the jaded creators of 3.5. Since its creation after the abysmal entrance of 3rd edition, 3.5 became a juggernaut in gaming. This longevity was increased by the piss-poor 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but that is a story for another day. The combination of power that D&D name has, plus the open-source gaming license which dominated the indie RPG world until the past couple of years, made D&D 3.5 the absolute standard bearer until the 2010s. Which really is a shame considering the fact that D&D 3.5 isn't very good. The thing is that I do not think there are a lot of people who will challenge this fact, and a lot of the people that do are into some sort of deep denial. 3rd edition was a piece of shit, sure. 3.5 was an improved game, let's say. And then Pathfinder spawned from its game that was meant to be a good version of 3.5. There is an entire gaming franchise based on the fact that 3.5 was not that good, and here is the improved version. And yet we still played it. We still played it. We played it for close to 10 years. We even still play it to this day. There are a lot of people out there that still play 3.5. We still whip out the mat, we whip out the miniatures, we whip out the dice, and we play 3.5, regardless of the fact that the game is mediocre to passable at best. But why? There is a little bit of the GURPS problem that is present in the D&D 3.5 conundrum, but there is a little more than that. Yes, both games were typically played by players because there was nothing better to game with, but while GURPS was an amazing game, D&D was a mediocre game that forced itself into the public consciousness. Pavlov's dog for gamers. The thing is that D&D 3.5 wasn't terrible. It was okay. It was an okay game that followed on the heels of AD&D, arguably the greatest RPG ever made. For old-school gamers who grew up with AD&D, 3.5 was a begrudging decision you had made to support the once great juggernaut. And then, for those who were introduced to gaming via 3.5 or Pathfinder, it was good enough to play and become engrossed in for lack of a better understanding of gaming. And for those of you who are about to get angry with me and call me out for being kind of a condescending prick, listen, I was one of these people. For the longest time, I was one of these people. The first game I ever played was D&D 3.5 and then Pathfinder soon afterwards. It was my first experience in gaming, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, because for the first time I got to really game. And then I got exposed to other games. World of Darkness, especially classic World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, Call of Cthulhu, Shadowrun, AD&D. All these other great games, and I started to get to see what good role-playing games look like. And after my eyes were open to the fact that there were other games out there that were a lot better than Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, it's really hard to go back. I think that this game calls on us to give a little bit more on this one. That the typical review is not enough to justify the feeling that 3.5 gives you and what 3.5 did in history. So instead of taking the usual route, I'm going to provide you with a list of the top 5 reasons why D&D 3.5 is not a good game, yet is still lodged in our public consciousness. Number 5. The focus away from role-playing and onto the battle map. Woo! Buckle up, everyone, because this isn't a list of 5 to 1 worst to the absolute worst. This is the 5 reasons, and the first reason is going to permeate through the other 4. So bear this in mind, but the way that I really want to start this out is by making an earnest confession. I really don't like miniatures and battle maps. After experiencing other games that do not require a miniature set and battle mat in order to play, I have quickly become soured on the concept of a battle mat as a means of which to play on. It always seems whenever the map comes out that the focus doesn't become role-playing anymore and exploring this awesome world and developing characters and developing a cool plot, but it turns into a lot more of just army generals surrounding a table looking at the best strategy to win a war. It takes all of the fun out of role-playing and makes it into nothing more than strategy. And I'll be honest, the strategy part and everything like that and deciding what's the best way to fight is kind of my least favorite thing about role-playing games. I begrudgingly pull out the map whenever I am playing D&D and it's time to enter combat, because I can completely understand that the map is perfect for combat in D&D. But beyond that, I outright refuse to have mats in any other game that isn't D&D. I just never liked them. I know there are other people like me who fall along the same logic. And honestly, if you like mats, if that is your favorite part of the game, then please, don't take any offense here. You take that, you enjoy it, I am not trying to take that away from you, it's just not for me. But they have become such an intricate part of D&D that most people cannot even fathom playing a game without it. Prior to 3.5, you didn't need the battle mat. You didn't need it. You used it for combat, but you didn't need it to create a world or to draw boxes, or if you wanted to, you could, but you didn't necessarily have to. From this point on, the battle mat became an intricate part, and as such, with the battle mat comes less of an idea towards role-playing and a lot more towards a miniatures battle simulator. There are still some great role-playing elements, and as long as you have a good DM, then the role-playing can shine, and it feels less like a gridline battle simulator. 5th edition really took the 3.5 concept and injected some much-needed role-playing into the game. But the fact is that you can get away with not using the map for AD&D, and even 5th edition D&D. But for 3.5, having that mat on the table and the mountains upon mountains upon mountains of miniatures is almost a necessity to eventually fully comprehend what's going on. Which, coincidentally enough, brings me to number 4. Number 4. That sweet, sweet miniature money. If there's one thing that I could tell you about miniature games, those people make bank. Well, okay, they're not rolling in dough, but they easily make money compared to other gaming systems that are just role-playing games. With a set of thousands upon thousands of collectible miniatures to get your hands on, miniature gaming is an easy way to make a ton of money off of just one product. Ask anyone who plays Warhammer 40k or the Star Wars miniature battle games. Those games are labors of love, and to truly get into it, you better hope that you have a steady stream of cash going into your bank account to truly invest into the game. Needless to say, when Wizards of the Coast and the creators saw the amount of money games like Warhammer 40k were pulling on the miniatures, well, it wasn't that hard to be seduced by the dark side of the Force. Although Cook had really little to do with this decision, I couldn't resist. Just like 4th edition was based on modern-day MMORPGs like World of Warcraft, 3.5 was based on miniatures for the sake of turning D&D into less of a role-playing game and more into a miniatures battle map. And no, they are not the same thing. Maybe the same differences, but they're not the same thing. Making itself a blend of the two, D&D made it almost a necessity to incorporate miniatures and battle mats into gaming, thus making it essential to not only pay around $60 per book to buy, but to also purchase the battle mat and miniatures before it was all said and done. Also completely changing the culture so that anyone who starts to pick up gaming thinks that the battle mat and the miniatures are an intricate part that have to be there. Considering that there were over 60 books in 3.5, combined with the mat, combined with the miniatures, combined with the pens and pencils, as well as the markers that you needed to draw on these mats, for the entire collection, you're ranging around $3,000 to $4,000 for one game. And of course, that is only for the hardcore players that bought as much product as possible, the ones that actually show off their vast D&D collection of miniatures and books. But still, if $3,500 is the extreme rate, then the average person is still shelling out around $500 to $1,000 in order to get the full D&D 3.5 experience. And in a time before the role-playing PDF formats were readily accessible and on the internets, that is absolutely insane. Number 3. Characters are just numbers. This might also be a little bit of a personal problem for me, but 3.5 can really suck all the love and all the joy out of character creation. At least in future games, they give you an opportunity to flesh out characters and make them your own. In fact, in 5th edition, it's an integral part of the game. But in D&D, besides the race, class, and alignment, you really only need the numbers on the sheet in order to generate a character. Which goes to show how the creators of 3.5 wanted this to be. They really wanted to take away the fluff of gaming and focus on the crunch. They wanted that battle mat, they wanted the miniatures, they wanted you to focus on the crunch of the game and taking away the fluff. Which really exacerbated that problem where people just referred to someone by their race or by their class. You know, hey elf, why don't you charm that person? Or hey thief, why don't you pick that lock? I mean, granted, that stuff was still going on in AD&D in 1st edition, but holy hell is that annoying. The sheet is so busy with numbers upon numbers that it's just so tedious to keep up with it all. Which, of course, the purpose of which is to make the game more conducive towards battle miniatures. With skills that take up almost a third of the page, it takes a lot of the joy and a lot of the life out of the game that seem to be a lot more of a math spreadsheet than anything fun. Number 2. Everything has a stat, everything is going to die. One of the strongest things about AD&D, 1st edition D&D, and a lot of the games that are coming out now, is that they know when to stat and when not to stat something. No matter how good your character is, no matter how godlike they might become, the sad fact is that there is always something bigger and better that's going to come around and defeat you. Prior to 3.5, these guys were everywhere. You didn't fuck with the Lady of Pain because you instantly lose. You didn't fuck with the gods because you typically instantly lost. Whenever you look at other games like Vorlons from Babylon 5, as well as Kane from Vampire the Masquerade, these are characters you can't beat no matter how hard you try. There is no stats. The fact of the matter is that you lose. You fail. Game over. You can roll as many crits as you want. The fact of the matter is you're still going to fail and die. 3.5 started the trend of statting everything. Since the game was now a battle miniature game, more than an RPG, gods and big creatures are just things that you can kill. That way you can create a miniature of them. Things to fight on the map. They had to be on the map. And now they're easily killable. Now they're easily surroundable. So now, everyone is statted. Everyone has a score, everyone has a number, and as long as you hit higher than that number, you're going to kill it. This is just another stab into the body of gaming. This absolutely killed concepts, because before these larger-than-life gods were really cool characters, were really cool plot points. Whenever you were in the presence of one of these things, whenever you were in the presence of the Lady of Pain, or one of these gods that didn't have a stat, that didn't have a set of numbers, it was an awe-inspiring moment. It was a humbling moment, but it was awe-inspiring. It was to let you know that your character is still small, but at the same time your character is still important because this thing has chosen to talk to you. It was really cool moments. Now, they have numbers, they have stats, they have a little miniature, or in some cases a big miniature, that you can kill. No matter how huge, no matter how insurmountable it might be, they can be killed. They're no longer the cool, awe-inspiring things, they're now trophies to collect. They're now things that you can kill. They're now things that you can go and brag to certain people that you were in a game that killed the gods, that killed the Lady of Pain, that killed Cthulhu. They're no longer cool, they're just trophies. They are a little bit more to pull out the big dick measuring stick and see whose dick is the biggest. Number 1, the open source gaming license. And this was pure genius. Genius that I haven't seen in quite some time. When D&D 3.5 came out, the actual system was called the D20 system. It was the system that went along with 3.5. The creators had an ultimate goal. They didn't necessarily want to buy up all the games in existence. You don't want to make a monopoly. But they did have a vision for a unified dice system. As such, they made the dice system, D20 systems, available for anyone to use. Now, of course, there were caveats and addendums to this. Nothing on this planet is free. But as long as you were a semi-reputable company and had put out several different games, you could really use this for nothing, really, or next to nothing as far as monetary value is concerned. As such, from this time period, you will see countless games from the period in gaming that use the D20 systems. Hell, you even still see them to this day. Thanks to it being everywhere, it was also beneficial to at least have a general understanding of 3.5 so that you can see how the game differs from the original. And thus, the genius has been revealed. Because your game is now open source, everybody uses it, but you're the original. So, while people don't necessarily have to read 3.5 in order to fully understand it, it really does help that you actually read 3.5 so you see how things differ, and so that you can see how things play out different. In a lot of these open source games, they flat out tell you to go buy 3.5 in order to play this game, because they're not going to explain the whole thing. They expect you to know the system already. And thus, D&D makes money from other people simply by saying, hey, you gotta buy 3.5 in order to understand this game. Genius. And then the huge flaw comes in, is once again, D&D Systems was a miniature-based system, trying to be implemented in a non-miniature game. Hence the creation of Call of Cthulhu D20, and others like it. Now, this miniature system is being used by role-playing games everywhere, and it's mediocre at best, and it's trying to fit that square peg into the round hole, that it just doesn't work. But regardless of whether or not it worked, regardless of whether or not the system fit the game, it worked perfectly in what it did. Everybody knew what 3.5 was. Everybody had 3.5. Everybody played 3.5, even though the game was mediocre. through acts of shrewd business tactics, as well as just being the standard bearer going into it. 3.5 was a mediocre game that rose to being one of the most influential games in gaming history by, instead of being mediocre, was just being used by fucking everybody. Overall, 3.5 is going to be one of the most historic games of all time. It was gaming from the time that AD&D ended to the time that 5th edition came to be. Even if people didn't like 3.5, Pathfinder was considered to be an improved version to be played, and it continued to be played through the 4th edition era. It influenced so many different games. It may have been bad, it may have been mediocre, it may not have been your favorite game, it may have been your plan B. But regardless, thanks to these decisions, even though the game wasn't that great, it certainly became iconic. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Hopefully this very clearly showed the problems with 3.5 and why I gave it a miss. Please, like and subscribe for more if you like this one, and come back for more videos from me.
Life's tough when you're an NPC. Life's rough when you depend on me. To give you weapons, items, armor, information for your journey and still